we are here, another video, and today we're gonna get the GasGas set up for Ryan for his suspension, him right there. So the KTM was all dialed for him. This one's a little taller, so we're going to lower it down, set the sag, check the air pressure, and we're gonna show you how that's done. So what tools do we need to do the suspension? We're gonna use some very non-traditional. We've got a mallet and a screwdriver. That's to loosen the collar for the rear shock. And then we're going to be using the air pump that should come with your bike, the WP air pump. And then we'll have some other basic tools that we'll use. Most importantly is so we can measure the sag and whatnot is we need a tape measure. And in the manual, it tells you how to do it. You first want to measure the sag, basically having the bike off the ground there and be able to measure that. You want the rider to sit on it, and then you want to measure, I don't know, something else, static sag, but I'll show you a screenshot of how that's done. So let's start by measuring up the first portion. All right, the first part we're gonna do is measure the static sag. So got the bike on a fake kickstand because our other ones are being used. Got the tape measurer, and now we need to measure the distance between here and here. And then we're gonna lower the bike and see what it is when it sits on the ground. So let's take the first measurement. Okay, here we have the tape measure from the center of the axle up to the fender part, and that's about 20 inches. So now we'll take the bike off and we'll have it sit on the ground so the suspension is slightly compressed, and we'll see what that measurement is. All right, bike is on the ground. Now let's see what this is. From the center of the axle to the seat. So we're at about 19 inches. So our static sag is 1 inch. Now that we know that on the lift, we're at 20, now it's time to put the rider on. You usually want to do this with the rider in full gear to make sure that they are the right weight, but we're gonna have this guy sit on the bike. All right, the static sag you want at about 1.18 inch, but also you wanna make sure that your rider can touch the ground. So now we can measure here and see what the difference is with him sitting on it and compare that to give us the rider sag. So center of the axle to the same spot on the plastic. And we are about 18. So looks like we got about 2 inches of rider sag. So the manual calls for 2.76 inches of rider sag. That does not include the dog. That is the child with all of the gear on. You can see he has his feet up on the pegs, and now go and try and touch the ground. So he's really on his tippy toes, which is gonna make it hard for doing trail and desert racing. So we wanna lower that back end down a little bit. We don't want him flat foot, but we wanna make sure that it's safe for him to easily touch the ground. Obviously with his boots and a little extra weight, he'll be close, but let's lower that back end down just a bit. So just to compare before we lower it, you can see here's the old KTM 65, and he has a much lower foot on there. And we'll quickly just check the measurement to see what the difference is. Center of the axle to the plastic, and we are at about 17 3/4. So this bike is just slightly lower, which helps him obviously with handling, turning, making sure that he can balance properly. So now we can get over here and adjust that shock. All right, so we need to loosen this collar. If you don't have a spanner wrench, mallet, flathead does the job. Obviously the old righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So we want to tap this and loosen this collar up. So now with this loose, we can start to loosen the spring. We want to make this left. That way the spring goes up, reducing the amount of compression. Now, for instance, if there was a taller rider, you could tighten down the spring to raise up the back end. Obviously, too much adjustment will change the way the bike handles, but we want to bring down the back end just a little bit. So you can see we're rotating this to the left so it loosens up. And we'll have to do it maybe a couple times to get the height that we need, and then we'll remeasure. So let's give this a good amount of turns. And then we can tighten back down the top collar. And then we'll remeasure it. Okay, got the changes there, so let's measure to see how much we went down. Remember, the height with it lifted was at 20, and before we were at, I think it was about 18. So let's see where we sit now from the center of the axle to the same spot on the plastics. So we're pretty much at exactly what the other bike is, about 17 3/4. And we can see here, if he goes to put his foot down on this side, it's much easier. He can easily touch the ground, and with a boot should be fine. So we got the rear lowered down where it needs to be. We can then look at the manual and we will adjust the low speed, high speed compression on the WPS shock, as well we'll check the air up here on the front shock to set it to his weight. First, we're gonna do the low speed compression, and to do that, we need a screwdriver and this nut right here. So not the outside nut, but the inside piece. And we're gonna turn it all the way clockwise until we hit the last click there. And from there, we're gonna back it out to go to the sport setting, because we're gonna go to the track and test this thing out, which is 15. So that's the last one. So we go 15 clicks out. 1, 2, 3, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So with that, now we can do the bottom rebound down here, which will be the same process. So rebound down here has less clicks, but the same process, and that's gonna be turning it all the way clockwise until you reach the last one. Standard is 5 clicks, sport is 2 clicks. We're gonna go standard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I got the rebound adjusted and the compression adjusted. Now we're gonna adjust the high speed compression, which is turning this full nut here and doing a similar process, tightening it and then loosening it, or doing the different turns counterclockwise. So to adjust the high speed compression, you're gonna need a socket wrench. This is a 19, and we're gonna turn this all the way clockwise till it reaches the end. Okay, that is the end right there. And we're gonna set this again to standard, which is gonna be 1.5 turns all the way out. One more thing to adjust here is going to be the dampening of the fork. Got this little red knob here, it says plus minus, and we're gonna back this thing out, go clockwise all the way so it's in. Then we're gonna back it out to probably a sport setting, since we are gonna go do track and definitely don't want him slamming the front down all the way. So sport setting is 10 clicks counterclockwise. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's done there. So this, when you go to the plus, is gonna make it stiffer, and when you go to the minus, is gonna make it softer. When we go do desert racing, depending on the track conditions, we might wanna make it softer so it's more plush to the rocks. And same thing with the rear, is we can adjust and change the compression up top and slightly adjust the rebound. So if we adjust the compression up top, that'll mean it'll be slower and not as fast and bouncy. That way we don't shoot ourselves off the bike. So with that, now we have to do is the air pressure with this right here and the provided pump, and then we're done. So you're gonna wanna take this WP pump they provide you and connect it to that Schrader fitting. Also, you see these little things right here? You've got one right there, and the other star screw, it's right up top there. Those are bleed valves. You can actually unscrew those very carefully and it'll let out the built up air pressure. They do make little ones that you can install there and just have a button up top you can press to let the air out. So let's connect the pump and then see where we're at with pressure. So the angle that they put on here is actually really tough to get to. You can't get this fat end of it here onto there without hitting the handlebar. You can see here on the KTM, it's actually flipped around on the front. So that might be something you want to consider doing before you actually start riding. It's much easier to get on it right there. So we're gonna get a little extension piece, or we might just slide the bar out of the way with these bolts, and then we'll put the bar back. So let's quickly figure out our plan, and then we'll check the air pressure. So I decided to loosen the bars. I got my Torx bit here. This is a T40, and I undid all 4 of those. And I'm gonna slide the bar just slightly over so we can get to that a little bit easier. So just gonna loosen that thing, move that over a skosh, and then we should be able to get directly on there. Much easier. Just wanna make sure you put this back so it's dead straight, as well as center or wherever they want the bars for their reach. So now we can connect this right there. Once you connect the pump, it'll immediately read a pressure that is in PSI, so 37.5 PSI. You don't want to go below 20 and you don't want to go above 58. Below 20, you'll probably bust something out because there'll be no pressure in there. And above 58, probably too much pressure and you could break seals. So that's going to be a one that you're going to want to test at the track and see what is a good middle ground for your kid, whether it's racing desert or at the track, and find out, you know, how that fork is performing. Obviously, the stiffer it is, the stiffer the suspension, probably better for motocross. The softer it is, could be good for desert racing. 37.5, that seems like something we've used before, so I'm gonna leave that right there. If I did want to fill it up, I could simply just pump it and it'll go up in pressure. And if I want to relieve the pressure, I just press this and it goes back down. All right, so there we have it. Got the GasGas MC65 suspension all dialed. We're gonna hit up the track here and take it out and see how it handles. So let's check out those clips next, and this video is done.